The moment Dr. Phil held that envelope, he froze, because what was inside was a truth no one in that room expected. His hand trembled slightly as he looked at the sealed manila folder. The studio lights felt hotter. The audience held their breath. And for the first time in 30 years of television, Dr. Phil McGraw did something he'd never done before. "Stop the tape," he said quietly. "Everyone, just stop." What happened in the next 7 minutes would become the most shared moment in daytime television history. 48 hours earlier, the show had seemed like a routine paternity case. Sarah Mitchell, 28, had reached out to the show claiming her entire childhood had been built on a lie. She'd grown up believing Robert Mitchell was her biological father, the man who raised her, paid for her education, walked her down the aisle at her wedding. But 3 months ago, Sarah had discovered an old letter hidden in her late mother's belongings. A letter that suggested everything she knew about her identity might be false. "Dr. Phil, I need to know the truth," Sarah had said during the pre-interview. "My mother took her secrets to the grave. But I can't live with this uncertainty anymore." Robert Mitchell, now 58, had reluctantly agreed to appear. A quiet man who worked as a high school math teacher in Ohio, he'd spent 20 years being Sarah's dad. The thought of losing that relationship terrified him more than the truth itself. But nobody, not the producers, not the audience, not even Dr. Phil, was prepared for what that DNA test would reveal. The show opened normally. Dr. Phil walked onto the stage to thunderous applause, his trademark confident stride carrying him to his chair. Sarah sat in the guest seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Robert sat beside her, his face a mask of controlled anxiety. "Sarah, you reached out to us because you found something that changed everything you thought you knew about your family." Dr. Phil began, his voice carrying that familiar blend of authority and empathy. "Tell us what happened." Sarah's voice cracked as she spoke. 3 months after my mom died, I was cleaning out her closet. There was a shoebox pushed way back on the top shelf. Inside were letters, and one of them was from a man I'd never heard of. She pulled out a photocopy from her purse. He wrote about our daughter and the secret we have to keep. The date on the letter? 1 month before I was born. The audience gasped. Robert's face went pale. Dr. Phil leaned forward. "And you confronted your father, Robert, about this?" "I did," Sarah whispered. "And he told me he didn't know. That mom had never said anything. That as far as he knew, I was his biological daughter." Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Dr. Phil turned to Robert. "Sir, when Sarah came to you with this letter, what went through your mind?" Robert's voice was steady, but his eyes were wet. "Dr. Phil, I've been Sarah's dad since the day she was born. I changed her diapers. I taught her to ride a bike. I scared away her first boyfriend." A sad smile crossed his face. "Biology doesn't change any of that. But I understand why she needs to know." The audience murmured their approval. This was a man who loved his daughter unconditionally. "And that's why you agreed to this DNA test?" Dr. Phil asked. "That's why I'm here," Robert confirmed. "Whatever that envelope says, she's still my daughter. Always will be." Dr. Phil nodded slowly. "Sarah, before we open these results, I want to ask you something. What are you hoping to find?" Sarah wiped her eyes. "I just want the truth, Dr. Phil. I've spent 3 months living in this nightmare of not knowing who I really am. If Robert isn't my biological father, I need to know. And I need to know who is." But what no one in the studio knew was that the production team had already opened the results. And what they'd found had made them immediately call Dr. Phil's chief producer backstage. "The results are here," Dr. Phil said, holding up the sealed envelope. The camera zoomed in on his hands. The envelope was standard medical issue, white, official-looking, with a lab seal across the flap. Dr. Phil stood up. He walked to the center of the stage, envelope in hand. And then he stopped. He looked at the envelope. Then at Sarah. Then at Robert. Then back at the envelope. The studio went completely silent. "Hold on," Dr. Phil said. His voice had changed. The confident TV host persona had dropped away, replaced by something raw and real. "Before I open this, I need everyone to understand something." He turned to the audience. "What's in this envelope will change someone's life forever. This isn't entertainment. This isn't drama. This is real. These are real people." Then Dr. Phil did something unprecedented. He looked directly at the camera. "I want everyone at home to know, we have counselors standing by. We have support systems in place. Because what we're about to do here, this matters." He turned back to Sarah and Robert. "Are you both absolutely certain you want to do this? Because once I open this envelope, we can't go back." Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I need to know," Robert simply said. "Open it." Dr. Phil paused mid-sentence. The studio went completely silent. Dr. Phil broke the seal. He pulled out the single sheet of paper inside. His eyes scanned the results. And then his face changed. The confident, always in control Dr. Phil McGraw looked genuinely stunned. His eyes widened. He read the paper again, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. "Stop the tape," he said quietly. Then louder. "Stop. Stop the cameras." The audience erupted in confused murmurs. In 30 years of television, Dr. Phil had never stopped a taping mid-show. A producer's voice came over the speakers. "Dr. Phil, we're still rolling." "I said stop. Dr." Phil repeated. He looked at his floor director. "Get me a commercial break. Now. And bring Jenny from counseling to the stage." The on-air lights went dark. The audience buzz grew louder. Dr. Phil walked over to Sarah and Robert. He knelt down between their chairs, something he never did on camera. His voice was low, but the studio microphones caught every word. "Before I share these results, I need you both to know that we have counselors here. We have resources. And whatever this paper says, it doesn't change the 28 years you've had together." Sarah was openly crying now. "What does it say?" Robert put his hand on Dr. Phil's arm. "Just tell us. Please." Off camera, Dr. Phil made a choice no producer expected. Dr. Phil stood up. He looked at the paper again. Then he made a decision. "Bring me the extended results," he told the producer. "The full DNA panel we ran. Everything." A young production assistant hurried onto the stage with a manila folder. Dr. Phil opened it, read through several pages, and his expression shifted from shock to something else, something that looked like profound sadness mixed with determination. The cameras came back on. Dr. Phil sat down, the full report in his hands. "Sarah, Robert, what I'm about to tell you is going to be difficult. But you both deserve the truth." He looked at Robert first. "Sir, according to these DNA results, you are not Sarah's biological father." The audience gasped. Sarah's face crumpled. But Robert just nodded slowly, as if he'd been preparing himself for this moment for 3 months. "But that's not all," Dr. Phil continued, his voice gentle but firm. "When we ran the DNA panel, we included something standard in our protocol, a familial relationship analysis." He turned to Sarah. "Sarah, the letter you found from our daughter, it wasn't written by your biological father. It was written by your mother's brother. Your uncle." The confusion on Sarah's face was evident. "I don't understand." "I don't have an uncle. Mom was an only child." "No," Dr. Phil said slowly. "Your mother told you she was an only child. But according to these records, she had a brother. A brother who died 6 months before you were born. But what happened next is something no one in the room, or watching at home, saw coming." Dr. Phil opened the manila folder wider. "When your mother's brother died, he was 23 years old. He died in a car accident. And Sarah, he was your biological father." The studio erupted. The audience stood up. Sarah's face went white. "What?" she whispered. That's impossible." Dr. Phil's voice was infinitely gentle. Your mother and her brother were victims of sexual abuse by their stepfather when they were teenagers. Your mother got pregnant when she was 17. Her brother, your biological father, died before you were born. Your grandmother helped cover it up to protect your mother from scandal and trauma. Robert's face showed pure devastation, not for himself, but for Sarah. He reached for her hand. The letter you found, Dr. Phil continued, was written by your uncle to your mother, talking about their daughter. He wanted to be part of your life. But he died before he could be. Sarah was shaking. My mom, she never told me. She never. She protected you, Dr. Phil said firmly. She gave you a father, Robert, who loved you unconditionally. She spared you from knowing a truth that would have broken you as a child. Your mother carried that burden alone so you wouldn't have to. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. Dr. Phil stood up and walked to Sarah. He knelt down in front of her chair. Listen to me. What happened to your mother was not her fault. What happened to your uncle was a tragedy. But what your mother did, choosing Robert to be your father, creating a safe and loving home for you, that was an act of profound love. He turned to Robert. And sir, you are her father. Not biologically, but in every way that matters. You chose to love this child. You chose to raise her. You chose to be here today even when you were terrified of the results. Robert was crying now, openly. She's my daughter, Dr. Phil. Nothing changes that. Dr. Phil pulled something from his pocket. It was a small card. This is the contact information for the best trauma counselors in the country. Specialized in generational trauma and complex family situations. I'm personally covering the first year of therapy for both of you. The audience erupted in applause. But Dr. Phil wasn't done. And Sarah, I want you to understand something. The reason your mother never told you isn't because she was ashamed of you. It's because she was protecting you from a trauma she endured. She gave you a better life than the one she had. Sarah looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. I wish I could tell her I understand. She knew, Dr. Phil said softly. That's why she kept the letter. She knew one day you might need answers. And she left you just enough to find the truth when you were strong enough to handle it. He gestured to Robert. And she gave you a father who would stand by you no matter what that truth was. Robert moved from his chair and wrapped Sarah in his arms. The audience stood and applauded. Some were openly weeping. Dr. Phil stepped back, giving them their moment. The cameras stayed rolling, but he motioned for the crew to give the family space. After the show, something happened that the audience never saw. When the cameras stopped, Dr. Phil brought Sarah and Robert to his private office. There, he arranged for 3 additional people to be present, a genetic counselor, a trauma specialist, and a family therapist. What you learned today is going to take time to process. Dr. Phil told them. This isn't something you get over in a day or a week. It's a journey. He handed Sarah another card. This is my personal number. Not for the show. For you. If you need help, if you're struggling, you call. Anytime. Sarah looked at the card, then at Dr. Phil. Why are you doing all this? Dr. Phil's answer was simple. Because this is what matters. Not ratings. Not viral moments. Real people getting real help. Over the following months, Sarah and Robert began therapy together. They processed the complex truth of Sarah's origins. They worked through the grief of losing Sarah's mother without ever getting to ask her questions. And slowly, they rebuilt their relationship on a new foundation, one based not on assumed biology, but on chosen love. The impact of that episode resonated far beyond the studio. The National Alliance on Mental Health reported a 300% increase in calls to their trauma helpline in the week after the episode aired. Thousands of families dealing with similar secrets reached out for help. Dr. Phil's decision to stop the cameras, to prioritize Sarah and Robert's well-being over entertainment value, became a defining moment in his career. It reminded viewers why they trusted him, because when it mattered most, he chose humanity over ratings. The DNA envelope that had frozen the studio that day sat in Dr. Phil's office for years afterward. He kept it as a reminder that behind every case, every story, every dramatic reveal, there are real people whose lives hang in the balance. And sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is simply stop, acknowledge the weight of the moment, and choose compassion over spectacle. 1 year later, Sarah sent Dr. Phil a letter. In it she wrote, "You gave me 2 gifts that day. The truth about where I came from, and the confirmation of who my real father is. Robert raised me, loved me, and stood by me even when he learned we didn't share DNA. That's not biology. That's love." She ended with, "And you showed me that it's okay to grieve for the mother I lost, the uncle I never knew, and the grandmother who carried such a heavy secret. But I don't have to carry it alone. Thank you for teaching me that truth, painful as it is the first step toward healing." Dr. Phil kept that letter framed in his office, right next to the DNA envelope. Because that's what his work had always been about, not the drama, not the reveals, not the television moments. It was about helping people find their way from pain to healing, from secrets to truth, from isolation to connection. The day the studio froze wasn't just about DNA results. It was about the moment when everyone present, audience, crew, family, remembered that some things matter more than entertainment. That real lives deserve real care. And that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply stop, breathe, and choose humanity.